He didn't wear his war on his face. He wore it on his jacket, stitched quietly onto the sleeves, where memory met fabric. And when two young officers mocked him on a Tuesday morning, they thought he was just another old man walking slowly down the street. But that's the thing about silence. It often hides the loudest acts of valor until you look closer. He wasn't bitter, wasn't broken, just older than they could imagine and deeper than they could understand. Men like him had stopped explaining themselves long ago, not because they had nothing to say, but because the world had forgotten how to listen. And yet, he walked with dignity, not seeking recognition, not expecting applause, simply holding on to the past because the past had shaped every step he took. It was the kind of morning that didn't care who you were, gray sky, sharp breeze, and silence between traffic lights. Retired Staff Sergeant Harold Franklin walked the same cracked sidewalk he had every Tuesday for years, from the VA clinic to the corner diner. His steps were slow but deliberate, his cane tapping in a steady rhythm. Left foot, right foot, tap. To some, he was just an old man shuffling down a street too fast for his legs. But to those who looked closer, his movement was more than routine. It was ritual, a march, a memory in motion. His jacket was olive green, worn at the elbows, sun-bleached at the shoulders. On the left arm, a faded Vietnam veteran patch. On the chest, 82nd Airborne. And under the flap, a metal ribbon bar, barely visible unless you were trained to spot such things. The jacket had seen more history than most textbooks. Across the street in a parked police cruiser, two young officers noticed him. Officer Jenkins was the first to comment, nudging his partner with an elbow and smirking. "Hey, soldier!" "Lose your tank?" he joked, sipping from a styrofoam coffee cup. His partner, Officer Logan Myers, laughed. "Looks like he thinks he's still in Nam. Probably hears choppers in his sleep." They laughed, not cruelly, not with hatred, but with ignorance. The kind born from youth and distance from reality. They saw an old man. That was all. Just another relic from another time. Harold didn't flinch, didn't turn, didn't stop. He just kept walking. "Should we call in backup?" "Might be carrying invisible grenades," Jenkins added, barely hiding his grin. But Logan frowned, his gaze lingering longer. "Hold on," he murmured, squinting. "You see that patch? Navy Cross. That's not something you joke about." Curiosity replaced amusement. Logan pulled out his phone and typed the name he saw beneath the insignia. Harold Franklin, 82nd Airborne, Vietnam. A few results appeared. Military citations, old newspaper clippings, even a feature on a Vietnam War site. The screen showed a black and white photo, a young man in combat gear dragging another soldier to safety, bullets spraying in the background. "Holy," Logan whispered, his voice hollow now. The mood in the cruiser shifted. Jenkins leaned over to see. The laughter faded. The air felt heavier. Harold turned a corner, unaware, or perhaps fully aware, of what just transpired behind him. His stride never changed. The cruiser idled for a moment. Logan stared out the window at the fading figure. No longer just an old man, but something more. "Pull over," he said. "Now." The cruiser rolled slowly toward the curb. Jenkins turned down the radio, suddenly unsure of what to say. Logan stepped out first, the door groaning slightly as it swung open. He adjusted his belt, squared his shoulders, and jogged toward the figure ahead. "Sir, excuse me," he called. Harold stopped. He turned steady and deliberate, his cane planted firm on the sidewalk. His eyes, a clear blue that had seen both birth and death, locked onto the officer. "What is it, son?" he asked, voice calm, gravelly with time. Logan hesitated. Up close, Harold looked even older, his wrinkles deeper, his skin weathered like aged leather. But there was a strength beneath it all, an unshaken calm. "We didn't know," Logan started. "We saw the patch. I looked you up and you're Staff Sergeant Harold Franklin. The citation said you—" "Carried 3 men out under fire," Harold interrupted. not with pride, but with a tone of matter-of-fact duty. One didn't make it. The others lived. That's all. Jenkins had caught up by now, quieter than before. He kept his hands behind his back, his previous arrogance now shriveled into discomfort. "We were out of line, sir," Logan said. "I'm sorry." Harold studied them for a moment, then nodded. "You didn't need to know who I was," he said. "You just needed to remember who you are." The words hit harder than any lecture. Logan dropped his gaze. "I think we forgot that," he admitted. Harold looked beyond them toward the VA clinic in the distance. He shifted slightly, pain flickering in his knee. "You boys new to the force?" "2 years in," Jenkins replied. "Still learning." The diner was warm, smelling of coffee, bacon, and old linoleum floors that had soaked up 50 years of stories. Rosie's diner hadn't changed much since Harold first walked through its doors. There was comfort in that. The faded red booths, the stubbornly humming jukebox, and Rosie herself, who remembered names better than birthdays. Harold took his usual seat in the back left corner, where he could see the door and the windows. Old habits. Some things the war couldn't take, and some things it left behind like ghosts. "Morning, Sergeant," Rosie greeted him with a smile that held memory. "Morning, Rosie." She poured his coffee without asking. Black. Always had been. Harold unfolded the paper, but barely skimmed the headlines. His hands trembled slightly as he raised the cup. The VA meds didn't stop the shakes, but they helped dull the memories when they got too loud. Today wasn't one of those days. Today the memories sat quietly, watching. A few booths over, a father and his young son were finishing breakfast. The boy couldn't have been older than 9. He stared at Harold, eyes wide, curiosity unfiltered. "Dad, is he a soldier?" the boy whispered. The father looked over, recognizing the patches on Harold's jacket. He nodded slowly. "Yes, son, a real one." Moments later, the boy approached, nervous. He stopped in front of Harold's table. "Sir?" he asked. Harold looked up, surprised but not unkind. "Thank you," the boy said, "for being brave." Harold's eyes softened. He smiled gently and gave a slow nod. "And thank you for saying so." The boy returned to his booth. The father gave Harold a respectful nod. Not military, but he understood. Rosie returned with eggs and toast. "Got fans now, do you?" "Seems like it," Harold said, voice low with a hint of amusement. "They give you trouble again?" she asked after a pause. He shook his head. They came back, apologized." Rosie raised an eyebrow. "Miracles do happen. They're just young. World doesn't teach them what it used to." "No, but maybe you still can." Harold said nothing, but her words lingered. After breakfast, as he stood slowly to leave, he noticed something new on the wall near the jukebox, a framed black and white photo. 6 soldiers, standing in dirt and rubble, young, armed, tired. In the middle, a tall, lean figure, himself, 40 years ago. It hadn't been there last week. "Thought it was time," Rosie said. "Jenkins brought it in." Harold stared for a moment, then gave a small nod. He touched the glass briefly, then turned back to the diner. The boy waved. Harold saluted. That evening, Officer Logan Myers sat at the kitchen table in his apartment. The lights dimmed, a cold cup of coffee untouched in front of him. His laptop sat open, displaying the same article he had read earlier. Staff Sergeant Harold Franklin, recipient of the Navy Cross. He had read it 3 times now, not for facts, but for meaning. His father, Richard Myers, a former Marine with 2 tours in Iraq, stood in the doorway. "Something wrong, son?" Logan looked up. "I met someone today, a veteran. I made fun of him before I knew who he was." His father stepped closer. "Harold Franklin?" Logan blinked. "You know him?" "I've never met him, but I know of him. Everyone who served in the last 20 years knows the name. He was the kind of soldier we were told about when we were still boots. He dragged men through fire like it was instinct, didn't leave anyone behind." Logan leaned back. "I mocked him. Then you apologize, and then you listen." The next morning, Logan and Jenkins returned to the diner. Jenkins was quiet. Logan held a manila envelope. "Sir," Logan said when Harold looked up from his corner booth, "we'd like to ask you something." Harold raised an eyebrow. "You've already asked plenty." Logan smiled. "Not this. We want you to speak at the police academy. For the new cadets. They need to hear something we weren't taught. About honor, about humility." Harold considered, then nodded. "I'll speak, but not for me, for the ones who didn't come home." Later that week, the station's break room wall had a new addition, a modest plaque. In quiet steps walked the loudest heroes. Beneath it, Harold's name, and a copy of his photo. Logan had placed it himself. 2 weeks later, Harold stood in front of a room of fresh-faced recruits. The academy smelled like fresh paint and polish. The flag behind him was crisp, the room silent, not a phone in sight, no side conversations, only respect. He didn't begin with his name. He began with theirs. "You'll wear the badge," he said. "You'll earn the right, but the badge doesn't make you a protector. Your choices will." He told them about silence, about standing in a jungle clearing, bullets tearing through air, about caring men who'd once been strangers but died like brothers. He spoke of returning home, not to parades but to misunderstanding, of walking streets alone, and of how dignity didn't need noise. When he finished, the recruits didn't clap. They stood, in perfect silence. Logan stepped forward. "You once told me to remember who I am. That's why we asked you here." Harold looked across the room. "The uniform doesn't make you who you are," he said. "How you carry it does." And he walked out, slowly but taller. At the end of the hall, Jenkins was waiting. "There's someone here to see you." Outside, a young man in civilian clothes stood with a duffel bag. "Sir, I'm shipping out tomorrow. My dad told me about you. Said you were the reason he made it home." Harold looked him over, nodded once. "Then go, and carry someone if they fall." The man saluted. Harold turned back down the hallway. Left foot, right foot. Tap, still marching. Always marching.